What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Cover Band Confidential Podcast, the podcast for cover band musicians and band leaders to learn some new tricks and find a better way. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, I am Adam Johnson.
And here in Greensboro, North Carolina, Dan Ray.
How's it going, Dan?
Not bad. Not bad.
We were discussing before we started, we were both enjoying a lovely LaCroix. I don't know I know what brand yours is, but
yes.
The sparkling seltzer water movement has swept.
I mean, it's just overtaken us all so desperately, hasn't it? I mean, it's incredible.
It's refreshing, and it's got a little more mojo than a glass of water. So why not?
Why not?
Better than soda. Not as good for you as just plain water.
And I had somebody tell me there's nothing in it, and I said, "Well, taste it." You can't tell me there's nothing in it. Something's in that. They're not telling you what exactly.
There is, in fact, something, and natural flavor could mean lots of things.
Well, the word that LaCroix is using is essence, which apparently is vague enough to not trigger any kind of
FDA
regulatory concern. I don't know. But it's tasty, and I drink a lot of them, so off we go.
Right, and poop is a natural flavor as well. It's not a good one, but it is natural.
I will be interested to see if they come out with a poop flavored LaCroix.
Yeah, they probably won't. Actually, when at my office, they had one of those freestyle machines that had the sparkly water in it. And I drank so many that I went to the dentist and they were like, "Have you been drinking sparkling water?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" They're like, "Your teeth are messed up." So apparently the something about that is not good for your for the pH balance of your mouth hole. So in summation, sparkling water is good.
Hydration is a plus.
Good stuff. Anywho,
we're a high class operation around here.
Hey man, this is what you get.
It's true.
This is our free time deal. So I was you were regaling me of your tales of baseball greatness. How did that show go?
Well, it was interesting. It was we were told it would be an hour-long show. When we got there, the manager of entertainment for the ballpark, who is an extremely busy young woman in her early 20s.
Aren't they all?
Yeah. Let us know it was actually going to be 45 minutes. So we made some quick adjustments to the set list and called some audibles. They brought out two wireless mics on stands and set them up in front of our mains. And that was how they put us on the ballpark's big PA.
Wow.
And, we couldn't hear any of their PA from where we were because we were standing next to our PA. But word was it sounded pretty good actually out in the house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, surprisingly. I mean, they we play through a tower array system, so they're pointed right at sort of the mid-range crossover section. There would have been no bass, there would have been no treble. But in the ballpark, it's got those time issues anyway.
Yeah.
The guy giving the speech, today I feel like luckiest man. It's all of that was happening in the ballpark. So I'm sure we were a mess.
Yeah.
And they were talking over top of us and doing announcements over top. We were totally background music in the big house. But I can say I've now played through a PA system designed for 30,000 people, which is pretty cool. Would we do it again? So it was an exposure gig. We knew that. The biggest part of it was schlepping equipment. 45 minutes of playing, given we brought our own PA, is not much. At the end of the evening, what we got out of it was free hamburgers and one Facebook like. Okay, so on its face, that doesn't seem very worthwhile. I think if they were to approach us again for next season, we probably would say, we either need there to be a budget, and you've got thousands of people coming and buying tickets. Presumably, you could scrape together some bucks for the band, or we need more of a marketing effort out of you, because really there was an image they made and posted on their website in a blog post hidden on their website about the bands that were playing. It was one image that had the whole schedule for the whole season. Yeah. And they really didn't, if they had made a post on their Facebook page, which has several tens of thousands of followers, with a link to us the week of, that would have, I mean, even just incidental traffic through that would have been a huge spike in our prominence. And, even just that gesture would have made it worthwhile. I did, as I always do, the next morning, and made a post that tagged them and said thank you. And there was not even a like out of their account for that. And it was sort of like, I was sort of left with the feeling like I appreciated that they recognized that live music adds value to something, but I didn't feel like I was really well partnered with. I kind of felt like they took that value and didn't provide much value back. So
they left the cheeseburger on the nightstand?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So, but it was fun. We had a good time. We didn't play long enough to get even in a groove. I mean, we were all, it was not our best playing, and we had our second drummer with us. So it didn't quite feel like it always feels. There were some reasons why it wasn't just fantastic, but it was a good time. And interestingly, we sold a bunch of tickets. We had our people come out. We had fans show up who I didn't even expect, but people I've seen before at our stuff. By the end of our set, they were all sort of collected back there at the little stage. This stage was, if you stood on home plate and pointed over the third base up into the bleachers behind the backfield, that's pretty much where the stage was. So we were not placed prominently, even though we were in the PA.
Right.
I believe you could see us from everywhere in the bleachers, but we would have been tiny.
Yeah.
But by the end of our show, we had 20, 25 people, maybe 30 people back there dancing along with us, and they were our people. So we sold some tickets for them too, which is...
Yeah, that's another good leverage point.
Exactly.
If they do come back.
Exactly. So it was a good time. I probably wouldn't do it again. I will say we're booked heavy over the next couple weeks. We're recording this on a Thursday night. I have gigs Friday and Saturday, and then next Saturday, and then I have 2 gigs with Viva La Muerte in the following week, and another Lincoln's gig the following Saturday. So it's
nice.
All in, it's like 6 gigs in 3 weeks.
Okay.
Starting tomorrow. So it'll be intense. It'll be intense. It'll be fun.
Good stuff. So when we last checked in, I was heading out of town to Nashville, which was awesome. Quick backstory. I went to college at Middle Tennessee State University, and I, believe it or not, have a degree in music business.
There you go. They
have a music business degree program there, and I have a piece of paper that says that I learned something. So the upside to Nashville is that it feels like home. I got to have dinner with 2 of my good friends that I don't get to keep up with a lot. The funniest thing that happened was we were staying at an Airbnb right in smack dab in the middle of downtown Nashville, right on 2nd Avenue, 2 blocks from Broadway, which is just, if you've never been to Nashville, is just a hot mess. It's just touristy stuff, but the loft that we were in was gorgeous and a really cool building. And so, we normally wouldn't be down that way, but it was like, why not? So when we got there right around lunchtime, and the place wasn't available yet. So we're like, we'll just go down on Broadway, have a drink, and see what's going on. So I went to a place called Nudie's Honky Tonk, which is right on Broadway. It is it's a bar and live music venue that is based around a guy named Nudie Cohen, who did all those crazy rhinestone suits for all the country singers back in the day.
Nice.
So the main focal point of that place is that his 1960 whatever Cadillac Eldorado covered in silver dollars is hanging from the ceiling of this bar. Like it's driving up the wall. Wow. And right below it is a stage. So, they've got live music going all day long. And we were sitting there having a drink, and I checked the schedule, and my friend Aerith, who was in an Atlanta band called Love Rush that I played with, 10, 12 years ago, was literally starting in 15 minutes.
Cool.
I was like, babe, we got to stay. So we hung out, and he came in, and, I didn't tell him we were coming because I didn't know. And so we had a quick minute where we caught up, and then he started his set. By the way, 4 hours straight, no break.
Wow.
2 to 6.
Wow.
PM.
Wow.
And And then I ended up actually getting up on stage and doing a tune, which was fun. So I can cross that off my bucket list of, things I don't have to do again.
Right.
I sang on stage at a honky tonk on Broadway in Nashville.
Very nice.
So other than that, just hanging out with friends, eating food. Went to Carter Vintage Guitars, which is just a beautiful place to be. And good times. And then we came home and played a private event on Saturday. That was the one where I had to find a sub last minute because our bass player didn't know about it. And after completely losing my mind about finding somebody, another bass player friend recommended this guy who does corporate work like we do. I'd never met him before, never heard of him. He showed up and he freaking crushed it. I was very pleased. He was a super nice guy. And that's one of those things where he showed up, he was prepared, he was low key, he was low maintenance, and he will be getting lots of calls from me moving forward.
That's how you do it.
Just total pro. I was like, we actually, that was kind of a weird gig because they weren't really paying our normal rate, and they were kind of giving us grief about the venue, and they wanted it to be outside, and it poured buckets on Sunday or Saturday, so we ended up playing inside. Their secondary quote unquote worst case scenario venue was a clubhouse with 30-foot ceilings that was probably, I don't know, 40 yards long. So basically a really fancy living room, the size of a concert hall. That was what they were trying to avoid.
Yeah, they'd be ashamed to be in there.
Well, that's where we ended up being because it was pouring rain. And so there was a stage and a tent outside that was soaked, and we played inside in the air conditioning, and it was awesome. The crowd was great. We played really well, and I had a very, very nice time. So everything, all's well that ends well. Next thing for me is more Fanny Pack Friday prep. I finalized the set list, and this is the one where I've got 2 subs on it, so I'm still kind of freaking out. But we're trying to get a rehearsal together, and hopefully that'll be that. And on to the next thing. Our October is usually busy for us. Something about 80s bands and Halloween parties just kind of go together. So
sure.
Our dance card is filling up. So good. We're in a good spot.
Very good.
Ooh, I'm going to have another sip of LaCroix.
Of course.
Tonight's episode of Cover Band Confidential is brought to you by LaCroix.
If we had another dozen listeners, we could hit them up for sponsorship.
Please, LaCroix, just send us 3 sodas. That would be really, really, really great.
That's right. My money's going to you anyway, so.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been noticing when on the show notes, I've been saying the last few episodes that today's episode is sponsored by no one. So if we could get a LaCroix endorsement, that would be massive.
Yeah, well, our last couple episodes have been a little dark, so maybe we can.
They have been.
Cheer up a little bit and have some bubbly, effervescent fun.
Yes, and on that note, why don't we dive into the subject for today?
Yeah, well.
So tell us the backstory as to why we are having this conversation.
Many times as the days go by between opportunities to record a podcast episode, some conversation will flare up among the cover band online conversation participants, and a whole bunch of crazy, because it's the internet, a whole bunch of crazy will come out and render its opinion. And by the time those threads are several hundred comments long, I've either had a sense of humor failure about them or not. But one way or another, it makes it clear that there's some sort of question in the minds of some people about how things are done. And since I'm an opinionated person and I actually have studied a few things about this, I propose when those things happen to Adam that we have a conversation about it and kind of get clear about how things are meant to work. So in this case, the epic tale of inaccuracy and opinion masquerading as fact centered around topics called incorporation, business structure and tax.
Yeah. And that thread was terrifying. That was one of those things where I didn't catch it on the front end, and I saw the subject and I saw the number of comments. I loaded just one little section. I was like, nope, I'm not do not engage. I just kept on scrolling. It was not worth it. And not 2 seconds later, you were like, did you see that thread? I was like, I'm not doing this.
Right.
So we definitely agreed that it was a good topic to dive into. So.
Yep. So let's see. Let's deal with business structures first.
Yeah.
So are your projects incorporated? What's the business structure for your gigs?
As of right now, because of the this is very much a side hustle, a hobby type thing. We are not incorporated. I've been back and forth about creating an LLC or doing a sole proprietorship, and financially, it hasn't quite hit that point. But based on some stuff that happened over the past couple of weeks, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, that may be changing.
Okay.
So as of right now, I'm this is just additional income, and I'm using QuickBooks Self-Employed to monitor the my expenses.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, so what then is the reason a person might incorporate? Is it for here's the key question. One of the key questions.
Yes.
Is there a tax advantage to incorporating your band?
No.
The answer is no, there is not. There is not. There is not. And look, I'm not going to harbor any, well, maybe if you no, there is not.
There is no advantage.
Right. And there is no advantage in terms of taxation. Now, here's the advantage of incorporating your band is that it separates your finances from the band's finances. And if something goes horribly wrong at a gig and you are going to get sued, having a corporate structure in place means they can only sue you for the assets the corporation has, and your own personal assets can't be touched. However, if you are and like it or not, whether, if you're just a hobbyist, what you are is a sole proprietorship. That's the default.
Yeah.
If you're a sole proprietorship, then your own personal assets are vulnerable to that's the liability that's limited by a limited liability company.
Yes, that is, by the way, that is what LLC stands for,
Limited
folks.
Liability company. It does what it says on the tin. It limits your liability. You can only be sued for, the company's assets can be sued, but your own personal liability is relieved. Okay.
Yep.
However, taxes are done exactly the same way. In fact, an LLC is what's known as a pass-through entity, which means that its incomes and expenses are reported on your personal taxes, the owner's personal taxes, on a form called a Schedule C, which is the same form that the name of that form is self-employment tax. So even if you have an LLC, it's going to get reported on your personal taxes, and the math is all exactly identical.
Yep. Now,
if you have an S Corp or a C Corp, those are different kinds of incorporations that are a little more structured and sort of meant for bigger entities. The taxation the taxes work out money-wise the same, but the company has to file its own tax filing, and probably you need professional help with that. I did when I had one of those. And so that cost a little extra money. So you actually come out behind tax-wise once you factor in the tax prep costs.
Yeah, the S Corp and C Corp, depending on which state you live in, there's a few more hoops to jump through. In order to get that kind of classification for whatever it is you're doing. And if we can get as granular as you guys want, but I would highly recommend, if you are curious about these kinds of topics, to look into the specific tax laws of the state that you live in. Yep. Or in this case, the country you live in, because what we are talking about refers to U.S. entities only. That's right. We do have listeners from all over the world, which feels crazy to say, but it's true. And
explain it. We are.
Yep, Australia and Sweden and the UK and most places that speak English. Somebody tuned in.
Yeah, at least once.
But yeah, these are all things that you do need to consider. and you need to find out what your local municipality has to say about it.
Yep. So for tax reasons, there's absolutely no need to incorporate. You might want to incorporate for liability protection reasons, but even that, it's a judgment call whether you feel like that's worth it or not. It is the safer thing to do, I suppose.
Yeah. There's I've read some articles about when is a good time and when isn't, and it most of them say it kind of revolves around a particular monetary amount. If you make X amount of dollars a year doing this thing, it would be advantageous for you to incorporate. That number fluctuates. I've heard 25,000. I've heard 40,000. Yeah. And if you're making $100 on a weekend, you probably are probably fine the way you are.
Right.
But that whole thread started because somebody was asking about a 1099.
Yes. Well, that's the next thing to talk about. That's nice. But before we get to that, I want to say the corporate structure that I have set up.
Yes, please.
So, my band, the Clanky Lincolns, is Dan Ray, sole proprietor, doing business as the Clanky Lincolns. And you actually have to register it's called a certificate of assumed name. In every locality, it's going to be a little different. Here in North Carolina, the state has delegated that to the county. So I filed that with the county registered deeds. And they do a search to see that the name's not in use. Incidentally, in all of North Carolina, there appear to be no registered company names with the word Clanky in them at all.
Good on you.
Right. So I actually registered while I was there because it costs the same filing. You can put as many names as you want on a piece of paper. So I registered the Clanky Lincolns and Clanky Endeavors. And why I did that, the only reason I did that was because that piece of paper is required if you're going to walk into a bank and get a checking account in the name of your band, which was the next thing I did, so that I can now receive checks in the name of the Clanky Lincolns, that was like the one last piece of professionalism I didn't have in place. I had to, people hired us and all of our conversation and communication was under the name of the band, but then I had to have them write a check to Dan Ray, which is a little lame. So
yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's a piece of cake. Filing the name was $20, I think. Mm-hmm. And then, it was an hour of sitting with a person in a bank while they tapped on a keyboard for much longer than would have thought necessary to set up an account. And now we can do that. And I have Venmo set up so that I can deposit into the band's checking account and then Venmo money out of that to my players. Mm-hmm. But none of that required any kind of corporate structure at all. It's all, registered, doing business as a DBA name with the county, and then a bank account. So I, for the people who, like me, were embarrassed because I actually had a guy, we played a gig and then they handed us a check written out to the Clanky Lincolns and I couldn't cash it. He handed it to me and I was like, oh, dude, I'm sorry. I got to have you do this again. And it was at like a club and the treasurer wasn't in and he'd be in tomorrow. I was like, just added this whole piece of complexity to it that was totally unnecessary if I had done the legwork up front. So I really actually recommend doing that. It's really easy to do. I did it all in one afternoon and it was all set up.
Awesome.
So then there is, OMG, this venue wants to give me a 1099. First of all, is that am I being ripped off? It is, how do I handle that? Why can't they just slip me cash under the counter like every place else does? Does that kind of cover the range?
Yeah. For a second, I thought you were reading it verbatim for a second.
No.
So, Dan, what is a 1099 and what is it for?
All right. So 1099 is a tax form. Again, for our international listeners, you may have something similar in your locality, but we have no idea about that. So U.S. this is a form from the U.S. International Revenue Service, Internal Revenue Service. Not international, explicitly not. Just the national. And this is the form where you report to the IRS funds that you have paid to an independent contractor.
Yeah. And how much money does an entity have to pay you in order to require them to put that form, write that form out?
$600. Once they've paid you $600, they are required by law to file with the IRS that they have paid you that $600, and they tell the IRS that and give the IRS your social security number so that the IRS knows who you're talking about, and so that when you file, they can make sure that that income is there on your return.
Mm-hmm. So it's bad news for people who are trying to cheat on their taxes and not declare their income, but it is the legal method for which independent contractors, declare how much money they make.
Right. Now, it is also true that a lot of venues you play are just going to hand you cash, and that's never going to get reported.
Yeah,
that is a fact. And I'm not necessarily out to change the world about that. I don't think it's our job to make our customers toe the line on their own taxes necessarily.
Yeah, it's really not any of our business.
Yeah,
and there are interesting loopholes that I have been witness to. If you like, if a band, one of my bands would like play the same venue multiple times, they'd issue a 1099 to each individual member. Mm-hmm. So, you were only getting dinged for that one time, even though you might have played there 5 or 6 times.
So as they'd rotate which member got paid.
Right.
Got 1099.
Yeah.
Well,
that is a way. That's
a way. That's a way. The thing that a 1099. So if I'm a venue, why I want to do a 1099 is because, see, I made those dollars that I'm going to hand you under the table, and if I don't say something to the IRS about that, then I owe the IRS the tax on that money. Mm-hmm. However, if I write out a 1099 and I report that I gave you that money, I no longer owe the IRS tax on that. You do.
Right.
The way of passing the tax liability on to the independent contractor whose revenue it really is. Until somebody takes it home, it's a business expense for me, right? So it's actually, it relieves me of the tax liability on that money, and it puts that tax liability on the person who just got reported to have received it. Now, as a band leader, I've now got a 1099 filed under my name.
Yep.
And cash,
Me too.
Cash in my hand, and I hand that cash out to my guys. And at some point, I will have done that for $600 worth of payments to them. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I'm going to file a 1099 for each of them.
Yep.
Because that tax liability also shouldn't be mine. I gave them, there are 4 of us. I gave out 3 times as much as I kept.
Right.
So I'm not going to pay tax on all of that. I'm going to 1099 them, and they're going to report that income on their taxes and pay taxes on that.
Correct.
And that's really the right way to do it, is to pass through the tax liability and the tax burden all the way to the person who ended up with the money in their pocket.
Yeah. And at the end of the year / beginning of the following year, what should you expect in the mail?
So you'll get a copy of that. You'll get a copy of that 1099. Mm-hmm. Your 1099 filing will go with your annual tax return. So it's a 2-part form. You're going to fill out both parts. One part goes with your tax return, and the other part goes to the person who you are reporting to have given that money to. Yeah.
So basically, right before, at the end of the quote unquote fiscal, year, and before tax season, or right around when tax season starts, those venues will probably send you a cumulative document of all of the income that they have paid you. And that is what you will then use to put onto your tax returns. Now, we've done this a couple of different ways. There have been years, actually, in members only's case, this is the first year that I have passed the taxes on to my guys. Up to this point, we have shouldered the financial burden of paying taxes on our earnings for a number of reasons. One, I wanted to we were comfortable enough to do it. And we were also spending a lot of money investing in the infrastructure around the band, that even when we were, quote unquote, shouldering the load, we were spending way more than we were making, buying the PA and all of the stuff that goes into building a business. So it really wasn't that big of a deal, and we weren't really, declaring that kind of stuff. So it ended up being mostly a wash. This year we've been very fortunate, and I let the guys know at the end of last year, like, hey, I'm going to do this for you guys this year, but next year we're going to go ahead and do it, like everybody else does it. So
like the professionals do. One of the things that, there are two angles I hear on people trying to complain about this. One is that, in the good old days, the pros didn't whatever. That's nonsense. If this is a business, you pay tax on it. That's a professional thing to do.
Well, it's also the patriotic thing to do.
Well, that too. I mean, because there is this whole other, people get loud about how taxation is theft, and I'm not going there except to say that we live in a society and pay your damn part.
Yeah, this is not a libertarian.
No. God bless libertarians. Your ideas are fine until you get them out of a vacuum chamber. And
let's not open that up. We're going to get emails.
Oh, well, that'd be better. We love emails.
Yep, different strokes for different folks, I suppose.
Yes. The point is, you should pay your taxes.
Yes,
because the IRS really is not kidding around about taxes. I don't know if you noticed, but they mean business. So
it's true.
You should do it. Just to step back to something you just said, Adam. Did you expense all of that? You take business expense deductions for all of that investment you did?
I did.
Did you depreciate any of it, or was it all one time?
No, I did a lump sum. Given the way that we had financed it and how we were planning on using it, the juice wasn't really worth the squeeze doing the calculations and the filing. Yeah. So we just did a one-time lump sum, and that's that. Okay. We had debated on doing that with the vehicle that we use to drive our stuff. But again, it is a 90% personal vehicle that we use 10% of the time for business. So it didn't seem, it didn't seem like a wise use of our time. Now, if I end up buying a DeLorean and converting it into a time machine, we would do it that way and would value the depreciation and all of that jazz. Sure. But this is, the grocery getter that hauls PAs on the weekends sometimes. So
the point is, you really want to track every penny you spend on gear, because it can all be claimed as a deduction on your taxes, every cent of it. And there are a number of things that I took as a lump sum deduction in the last year. I am actually depreciating the PA, which means you split the deduction of it over several years. If it's like a durable purchase like that, something that you expect to use over a long time, and you don't need to get over some threshold to break even on your taxes or something, you can split it out over several years. So I've got a nice deduction coming on the PA over the next year and the year after. So I really recommend a tax professional to do this work with you and talk you through the pros and cons of it. I got somebody who's really fantastic here in Greensboro. In fact, I played her husband's wedding, or her husband's birthday last year. So her husband's wedding would have been interesting. So she hired us after doing our taxes for a couple of years. That's it's just a good idea to have a pro look at this stuff, and they can do sort of speculative math, some if-then sort of logic, and see what the best case is for how to work out the income versus the expense and all that stuff. But that's really not something I think is worth my own time and brain power. I got other things that I need to put my attention on. So I
do want to talk about that a little bit, because, I hear that a lot from certain people that, this can't be done. You need a professional, and I don't think that's entirely true.
No, it can be done. It can be done.
There are some really good resources for guys like us who are doing what we're doing.
Yep.
And I'll go ahead and do my little song and dance about QuickBooks Self-Employed. It is an app for your phone, as well as a website. And I'm using it to track the band's expenses. And it is literally, it's as easy as swiping left and right, because that's how you go in. What it does is it syncs up with your bank accounts and your credit cards, whatever accounts you want to sync to it. And you just review what you spend, and swipe left if it's personal, and swipe right if it's business.
Right.
Add a description, and then you move on. And the other thing that it does that's fantastic is that it tracks your miles in real time. So if you get in the car and you drive from one spot to the other, it logs it. So you don't even have to remember where you were or where it was or how far you went, because the phone is actually tracking your mileage as you go.
Yeah.
So it's about as foolproof as it can be. And you can also do things like, you can submit the payments that you make to the band as contract labor. So, I mean, it does all of those. It does that mechanism for you. And it's been really helpful. It's a little depressing, though, because I'm looking at my dashboard right now, and based on what we've made and what we have spent, I am $3,000 in the hole this year. Now, mind you, that's for a lot of different things, and $1,000 of that is just mileage alone.
Right.
Because we had some real long drives this year. We did that, a couple of out of state runs, and 50 cents a mile, they add up.
It does. I will tell you, when you mentioned that that app on the podcast, I don't know, a month or two ago.
Yep.
And I went and looked at it, and I looked at some of its competitors, and I found a thing that does a slimmed down version of that. It has a paid version that would do more of the things that you said.
Mm-hmm.
But this app is called Hurdler, Hurdlr. It's a terrible name, but what are you going to do? And it's doing basically the same mileage tracking thing. And you swipe left and right. I think they stole the whole idea and are doing it on the cheap. But since you talked about that, and I found this app, I have accumulated $292 in deductions on mileage alone.
Sweet.
So there you go. That's I've never tracked mileage because it just was going to be too much of a pain in the butt and too much pen and paper. But this is trivially simple, and it's free money. So
yeah,
you should do that.
It is fun to run your own business.
Yes.
But I mean, we have always kind of looked at this band as an adventure and as a way to have margin. A friend of mine he's got a similar kind of deal. He calls it a lifestyle business.
Right. So
it's a thing that you can use to have extra money to do things that you enjoy. And even, with the deduction saying that I'm, $3,000 in the hole, I haven't really lost $3,000. It's just based on the money that's come in and the money that we were spending on other things while we were doing those things. It, on paper, it comes out that way. Mm-hmm. I'm not losing $1,000 on mileage. It's just, that's how the taxes are formulated. So, it's been good for us, and we've used it to do all kinds of stuff. We've used it to fund trips. We've used it to pay off, debt, and there's all different avenues. But it is important that if you are going to do this seriously, that you treat the financial part of it seriously as well.
Yep.
So,
all right. To recap, no need to incorporate if you're 90% of the people listening, but you should look into it anyway. I think that setting up an assumed name and getting a bank account in your band's name is a great idea.
If nothing else, because it looks professional.
And then only because it looks professional.
Pretty much.
And then when the bar hands you money in cash, say thank you. And when they 1099 you,
say thank you as well.
Say thank you. Also say thank you. Don't ever not say thank you. And then distribute 1099s to your guys once they hit $600 for the year, which hopefully will not be further past, say, February or March.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the other thing that's crazy to think about, is that, I have spent over $18,000 this year on contract labor.
Yeah.
So my guys are doing all right.
Taxes on that. You shouldn't.
Nope.
Not your money.
No, yeah, because I that's not my money. I don't have it.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And now I know that, and I can keep track of it in real time.
Perfect.
So the thing that I was referencing earlier about considering, incorporating is that I am in the process of launching a freelance firm.
Yeah.
For my job. I kind of reached the point in where I'm working right now that there wasn't really any growth potential, and it's just kind of starting to affect my general well-being. I mean, I've talked about it multiple times on the podcast that I've just kind of felt like, in a rough spot. And I think part of it was that I was going to a job where just things weren't going anywhere. So I have made the decision to leave that job, and I'm going to attempt to start a consulting firm doing Apple-based support. And I've got a little bit of cushion. I've got about 2 months worth of expenses kind of piled up to see if I can drum up business, and I'll give it a go. I've got a website and a bunch of social media accounts set up, and worst case scenario is I go get a job.
Yeah. Very good. Congratulations.
So
that's great.
Yeah. It's scary. I'm scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it could be good. Could be fruitful. If I did the math right and I can get the kind of business I could make more money doing working less time, which would be actually good for everything else that I'm doing.
Right.
So I'm hoping that that is the case, and that we can try something different for a little bit.
Very good.
And I can start another podcast, Small Business Confidential or something.
That's right.
Because that's exactly what the iTunes store needs, is another small business entrepreneurial podcast.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, I've had a couple of really good interviews for really great positions, and I expect something's going to move here in the next week, 2 weeks, something like that. So
fantastic. That's the other thing that's like, when I was like, I'm not looking really for anything in particular, I've gotten a bunch of random, hey, you want to go have coffee? Would you like to meet for lunch? I'd like to talk to you about some stuff. So, just taking the season as it comes and gonna, hope for the best, and to new beginnings.
There you go. To new beginnings.
I would toast you, but I finished my LaCroix about 20 minutes ago.
Too. So we'll just empty can toast.
Yep. Love it.
Nice.
We should finish every episode like that.
We should, and maybe not always with LaCroix. Maybe something a little more.
Yeah, I have no beer in the house. Yeah. We are fresh out. And I made tacos tonight, and I was not only did I not have beer, but I didn't have tequila.
Ooh.
So I had to make do with I made a rum drink.
Well,
I mean, it was fine.
Yeah.
It worked, but it wasn't beer or tequila.
Well, I'm sure you can rectify that.
Well, and since I won't be working in an office, there's way more opportunities to to try new cocktails at odd hours of the day.
Exactly.
All right, man.
All right.
I was worried that this was going to be a bit of a ball ache of a conversation, but it was really good.
It's fun. And listen, I'm willing to bet people have questions. I'm willing to bet there's stuff that we blew past. I'm willing to bet people have oh yeahs or what abouts or you didn't mention. So what's that email address, Adam?
That would be coverbandconfidential@gmail.com.
Yeah.
It is. The phone lines are always open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
That's right. Our Gmail never sleeps.
It doesn't. And, we really are motivated to help you guys, to help you learn new stuff and to do what you do better based on what you hear on this little rinky-dink show that we do every week. So please do reach out.
Speaking of, my wife today told me that at work today, she listened to a couple of episodes of this podcast. And I said, what did you think? And she kind of said, you guys are nerds.
Yep.
And it was kind of a compliment. I was pretty proud.
But I actually forced my wife to listen to one as we were driving up to Nashville. And I like to listen to podcasts at 1.5 speed because, there's a challenge in doing a show like this because Dan and I are not in the same room. We're not even in the same state. so there's always kind of like weird, awkward pauses and that kind of stuff where you can't see the other person. So the conversation kind of, we've gotten way better than when we started, but, listening at 1.5 speed kind of condenses all of those awkward pauses and silence into something that sounds much more cohesive. But I listened to it at normal speed and I was like, ugh.
Well,
we're just doing the best we can.
Yep. I think we're doing all right.
I was listening to another podcast today, My Favorite Murder, if anybody has ever listened to that.
Yes.
And Karen, who's one of the hosts, said, you have a podcast inside of you, as kind of like an inspirational thing. So yeah, you have a podcast inside of you, and it may not be good because ours isn't, but we try.
Yep.
And every once in a while we have something good to say, and it's helpful.
And other times we rant about taxes.
Yep. But actually this might be the most helpful. It might be the only helpful one that we've done. The rest of it has been us kind of, shooting off about our opinions on things. Yeah. This was easily the most fact checkable.
Yes.
Of all of our episodes.
Probably true.
And that's the one thing that you do need to consider is that, I talk a lot about, people are asking like, how much should I practice and what kind of modes do I need to focus on? And, all of this stuff. And I was like, you need to put your music books down and you need to pick up a business book because if you want to be successful, it doesn't matter how many notes you can play. It's what you can, it's all the packaging and the marketing. And I was reminded of that again, launching a website and coming up with copy and doing all of this stuff that honestly gives me energy, gives me life that I don't do quite as often. And even my wife was like, "You're always doing band stuff, and the tone is very different." So it was very interesting to see, the way that you were able to, kind of put on a different hat. It's all the same. It's two sides of the same coin, but there's all different approaches. And we are musicians and we are guys who love performing, but we're also entrepreneurs. We get off on the creative. This is just as creative as any other endeavor, building a business out of nothing and hopefully making it grow and, trying new things. That's a part of the process that we really dig. So,
yeah.
All right, man. Very, very informative.
Yeah.
We'll call it for this week. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, this is Adam Johnson.
And in Greensboro, North Carolina, I'm Dan Ray.
You have been listening to the Cover Band Confidential Podcast, episode 21. Have a good week.